Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny. Today is the day that I am starting my final vlog for BookTube Prize Round 2 Nonfiction Group D. And so I am starting this one off with His Name is George Floyd by Robert Samuels and Toluse Olorunnipa. And yeah, this is about George Floyd, about who he was as a person and the system of the United States that created the conditions which led to his death. And so this is what I'm starting off with in this vlog, and I will check in again with you when I have gotten halfway. Hey everyone, I am halfway through His Name is George Floyd by Robert Samuels and Toluse Olorunnipa. Okay, so this book chronicles the circumstances around George Floyd's life, his ancestors in the United States that they know of, and the circumstances of his education, his family life, like really as much about him as they could probably possibly gather. And it is a chronicle of why and who he was as a person. And they also talk about Derek Chauvin. There's one chapter in the beginning that talks about Derek Chauvin, his ancestry, his upbringing, and then his subsequent decision to go into law enforcement. And so it's a very thorough look, and it's pieced together through, it sounds like tons of interviews, tons of first-hand accounts of friends of George Floyd's. He had a lot of friends. He knew a lot of people. And he was very well known in Houston, where he grew up in the area called 3rd Ward. And so that's what the first part is about. I think it's really well put together. I would say that if it was not for the BookTube Prize, I probably would not read a book like this, because I am more inclined to learn about this type of narrative in a documentary, because some of the details of like all the little details are not necessarily as pertinent to me as they might be to someone else. But I think as a work of documenting a person and a system that led to his death and that perpetuated the circumstances around which so many Black men and women suffer, it's a tour de force book. It's really a very important statement on that. Yeah, so that's my first thoughts of His Name is George Floyd, and I will check in again when I've reached the end of this book. Hey everyone. Okay, so I finished His Name is George Floyd by Robert Samuels and Toluse Olorunnipa. Okay, so I think this is a really well done book. It is I think they did a great job of assembling the information around George Floyd's life and his death and the aftermath of his death, where people were trying to make change. They did it in a really great way. They just were able to capture the people who were involved around George, the legislation, the trial, his girlfriend, his friends, his acquaintances, like people who were affected by him in his life, but also in his death. And they just described it in a really compelling way. I will admit, it was, even though it's only been 3 years, and actually it's interesting because it's been 3 years this week since his death. which is interesting to me because I wasn't necessarily waiting to read this on the anniversary of his death, but I ended up reading it on the anniversary of his death. So it was strange to revisit a moment in history that was so intense, and I remember so well because it was only 3 years ago, and see it from this perspective of people who were in Minneapolis, of people who knew George Floyd, and just remember my own memories of finding out about it and hearing about it and seeing the protesting. And so I think this is such an important book for for history, for posterity, that this has been assembled, that people can refer to this when they are looking for the evolution of equality and justice in the United States. This is a really important text to be added to that group of books. And I hope that the work that George Floyd's family subsequently did and are still doing to try to bring justice, to try to reform police procedure, will be successful ultimately. It's a difficult book to read because there's a lot of pain and difficulty and hardship that is experienced by George Floyd and all of the people around him, and there's so many systemic issues that are affecting people and that are making their lives less than fair, that are making their lives painful and filling them with fear that they can't function normally in society because they could die for, something as simple as going to the store to buy something. So really enjoyed this, and I will check in again when I'm halfway through my next book. Hey everyone, so I am halfway through How to Stand Up to a Dictator by Maria Ressa. This was actually one of the books that I voted for on the list, so I was very excited to start it. I thought it was going to be a memoir, and it is a memoir, loosely. I would say it's a lot more about her career as a journalist for various news outlets, but most notably CNN, based in the Philippines and in Asia, and then as the owner and creator, or creative director of Rappler, which is a news site based out of the Philippines that really spearheaded a lot of the data collection of around news. And so the things that are being revealed right now about her exposure of Facebook and the things that were happening on Facebook with, nefarious accounts that were spreading misinformation and leading to things like Brexit and the election of less than ideal leaders is fascinating. But it's also not really laid out in a way that I find is working for me as a read. I really found she was very focused on her personal story for the first quarter of the book, and now she's really dropped her personal story other than how it relates to her job at Rappler and the things that were happening to her from Duarte, who's the president of the Philippines and who was actively trying to stop her from exposing his corrupt government. So it's really a lot of the things that she'd built up about her personal life have really faded away into the background of the story, and so I really don't know what's going on with those things, and I don't find that the weaving of the personal her personal life with her job is working very well at this point in the story. But I still have the rest of the book to read, and I still think it's a really interesting story, and certainly information that I did not know. I've heard of Maria Ressa before, but I did not know a lot of this other information. It's just not something that was on my radar at all. So I'm learning a lot, but it's not necessarily being presented to me in a way that I find that I'm finding easy to read and easy to consume. I'm kind of having to force myself to read. And that also, to be honest, could be the result of this being the last book for me of the BookTube Prize. So I've been reading these nonfiction books for 2 months. This is the last one, and I think I'm definitely experiencing some fatigue because all of these books were quite long and quite involved and very specific topics. And so I think that might be affecting my experience of reading it. So I'm trying really hard to be as open towards it as possible because I know it's not the book's fault that it was the last one I ended up reading. So yeah, those are my thoughts so far on How to Stand Up to a Dictator. And I will check in again with you once I have finished the book. Hey everyone, I'm checking in because I finished How to Stand Up to a Dictator by Maria Ressa. And I thought overall it was a very well-written and compelling book. It definitely didn't live up to the memoir part that I was kind of looking for. She did get into personal things, but it just didn't feel as personal as I like my memoirs to feel. It instead felt a lot more like exactly what it said in the title, kind of her documenting her struggles with the government figures of the Philippines and their unlawful attempts to control her and Rappler, the website that she runs. She did share some personal things about friends and different things like that happened. But overall, that part was just a little disjointed to me. So while I really did enjoy reading it to learn about all the things that she was sharing, I also didn't find that it was as I didn't feel as touched by it or as connected to it as I was hoping to, and as I would want to when I'm reading a book like that. So that concludes my BookTube Prize nonfiction Group D reading for the second round in 2023. I will be creating a rankings video, and I think I'm going to put my rankings video out first before all of my vlogs this time. So I will link my rankings video in this vlog down below so that you can watch that if you're interested in knowing how I ranked the books. It's going to be very interesting to rank these books because I didn't really dislike any of them. I liked all of them, and so I had to figure out how to categorize these books when I liked them all, which has never really been the case for me before in the BookTube Prize. So it was a different style of ranking than I've ever done. But I will talk more about that in my rankings video. Thank you so much for watching.